higher ed is terrified of contrast marketing because we always create content that is designed to offend the sensibilities of nobody. And so a lot of times doesn't say a whole lot.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday, I'll break down what actually matters. Fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. On today's episode, it's the campaign. Whether you love it, hate it, or just can't stop talking about it, you definitely have an opinion on it. Featherstone University has entered the chat. Satire meets strategy in the boldest higher ed spot of the year, a fake Ivy that made the whole industry just look in the mirror. Joining me today is David Ludlam, Vice President of Marketing Communications at Colorado Mesa University, the man leading the team who brought Featherstone to life, and Maria Kuntz, Director of Content Marketing Strategy and Communications for Advancement at the University of Colorado Boulder. David and Maria, welcome to the Pulse.
Thanks, Mallory.
David, we're just getting right into this today. There is no how are you doings, no let's chat about our kids in their Halloween costumes. No. We are just diving right in because we are going to pack this episode. If you all work in higher ed marketing, which I bet you do, you have seen this campaign, or at least you have scrolled past the think pieces about it. Featherstone University is a lavish, fictional campus where entitlement is the curriculum and privilege is the brand. Colorado Mesa University and its creative partners built this glossy, too perfect world to hold up a mirror to a real problem, a public that's losing trust in higher ed. And while most institutions are busy defending the system, CMU did something riskier. They laughed at it, and it struck a nerve. I noticed in the first week alone, there were 165,000 YouTube views. It's getting national press, and a full-on meltdown is happening in the industry insider group chats. This campaign is, in my opinion, hilarious, beautifully produced, but also polarizing, which I don't know, maybe is the point. That's why David's here today. So we will unpack how Featherstone happened, what the early data says about whether it's working, and what it reveals about higher ed's identity crisis. Now, listeners, we're going to do something a little different today as I actually pass the mic over to Maria. She lives in Colorado, was raised in rural Michigan, and just published an op-ed on Inside Higher Ed about this very topic. Maria, take the wheel.
Thanks, Mallory. And David, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about this. Can you walk us through the spark behind the Featherstone campaign? Where did the idea come from, and what problem were you actually trying to solve with it?
Well, implying that there was a spark, are you saying there's a fire of some kind burning right now?
Not in Colorado. Let's not imply that.
Well, I thought maybe on LinkedIn or in some of the threads, the spark for Featherstone, you kind of go back 4 years. And 4 years is about the time that President Marshall's tenure began. And I think it was the first day on the job. He laid out some architecture for a motif that has defined his tenure, and it's called the Human Scale University. And the definition for that is really important as we lead up to sort of how we got into this campaign, because the definition is, how do you know you're a human scale university? It's when we're a model of the world we want to create. And that proposition sparked a question amongst our faculty, our students, our staff, and our community, who all participated in our last strategic plan called Forming the Future. And the question was, who are you to say what kind of world we want to create? A student, President Marshall. And the answer to that was, well, we have these 7 first principle values that we spent a year selecting and refining and defining. And I'll never forget the day we had 47 people sitting around a table. And if you've ever tried to wordsmith something, to get 3 people to agree to something is quite the remarkable feat. But we got 47 people, a good mix of our faculty, students, and staff, community members, to agree to the definitions to our core values. And those are love and dignity, courage, humility, resilience, curiosity, and power. Sort of first principle, I guess, if you will, values. And if you're embodying those as imperfectly as we might all do every day, then by definition, you're creating a human scale university. And what that did is it unified campus in a way that I've never been a part of anything like it before. And it has enabled us to take risks, I guess, if you want to think of it that way, on multiple fronts, in terms of how we prioritize, spend our time. So President Marshall, one of the things he did was he said, look, every university in Colorado has some kind of a promise. It's called the Colorado Promise, or each university brands a little bit differently. Sort of usually it tends to be just a landing page on a website. And he said, but we're going to bring that to life. And any family that's making less than $70,000 a year, we're going to cover their tuition. And we're going to go out and actually deliver the promise in person. And so we put before him a travel schedule that sort of aligned with our admission operations. And he took it and he threw it in the trash. And he said, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to go to the schools that everybody goes to all the time. I want to go to the forgotten schools, the ones that haven't been visited, that nobody's paying attention to, and that represent a lot of the students that we serve. And so we came back and he ended up visiting around 20 rural schools. And when I say rural, I mean Nucla, Natarita, North Fork.
So David, just to jump in there, explain Nucla, because not many people in Colorado know where Nucla is, and I'm pretty sure most of the listeners don't know what Nucla is.
Well, let's say that a lot of people think that Grand Junction in western Colorado is hard to get to. Nucla is about 2 hours away from here, and it's in sort of the far reaches of rural western Colorado. And President Marshall visited around 20 rural schools, and then, from there, he went and visited some of the most urban schools in our state. And the reason that I'm kind of building up through building a through line here is I think that was a really grounding experience for everybody involved, including him. And the tagline that you hear in the campaign, which is that we care about who you are, not who you know, which can easily be transposed into who you are, not where you're from, who you are, not how you look. Those lines just started, coming out of his mouth as he talked to students. And so I think, where did the spark come from? It came from the president of our university with a through line to our values, because what could you say to another human being that's more loving, which is our primary value, than to say, I care about who you are, not some extrinsic characteristics or factors that don't necessarily define the core and essential elements that define you. And so really, it came from our president's messaging that he developed while he was out talking to the students we serve.
So how do you go from that loving, heartfelt, very sincere belief and connection to community and service and transform that into satire that has caught a lot of attention and a lot of criticism?
Well, I guess it's a little embarrassing to say, but I'll kind of reveal a few things that we did here internally. So, everyone on our team contributed something unique. And they say that groupthink ruins projects, but in our case, it didn't, because we are aligned with what we were trying to accomplish. Everyone understood what we were trying to do. And when you have that alignment, it opens up sort of the creativity in everybody, and that did on our team. But I think, I think about my contributions. I sort of laid awake at night thinking about the neuroscience of perception and how that relates to contrast. And, it starts at the molecular level, but it works up through how our nervous system works. And you think, I'm at a white table, you can't see it here, but I have a green coffee mug. How did I know how to pick up the green coffee mug? Well, it's because the texture and the contours and the greenness of the coffee mug are much different than the table. And that's how I identify what is coffee mug and what is table. And when you take that up to the highest levels of abstraction, I think you get to contrast marketing. And higher ed is terrified of contrast marketing because we always create content that is designed to offend the sensibility of nobody. And so a lot of times doesn't say a whole lot. And so we identified that, what are those lasting, impactful stories that get at the heart of who our students are? And I have to tell you, we watched together as a team the scene from the Titanic, where Jack and Rose are going to dinner above deck, because if you recall, Rose's fiance invited Jack to embarrass him on the first deck of the Titanic. And Kathy Bates, the unsinkable Molly Brown, helps Jack get the right clothes, and he attends the dinner, and he ends up besting them at their own game through his authenticity and his self-deprecation and his just brutal honesty about who he is and where he came from and what he wants to do in life. And if you haven't seen the scene lately, go back and watch it, because it's sort of the story of our spot. And the same is true with Dirty Dancing and The Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink and all of these great, films that highlight the grit and the resilience and the curiosity and the things, the values that are embodied in the heroines and the characters that are in these films. And so it's kind of funny that we were looking to those sort of heroes' journeys nested inside the Karate Kid. I don't know if I mentioned that one. That was another one. But we watched those, and you can see that through line, that storyline in our spot. And so it wasn't anything, that had to do with higher ed. It was the things that represent the journey of many of our students, which is underdog and transcending exclusive structures, maybe.
Mallory, you speak to a lot of universities about brand and enrollment marketing. What do you think about this approach really reaching to sort of the collective consciousness, the collective pop media, pop culture for influence? Do you see people doing that or shying away from it?
Well, certainly not to this scale. I mean, I think that the pop culture approach works because it's instantly recognizable, right? So while I didn't see Titanic or Dirty Dancing in the Featherstone campaign, I saw Bridgerton and Shiz University from Wicked, right? And both of those things are very culturally relevant right now, but that's okay that I saw those things. Like, pop culture is a way to get instant recognition and faster meaning, but we don't see that used very often within educational marketing, right? As a friend in the industry of mine has said, like, higher ed marketing's maybe lost a bit of its swagger. And I really liked it when Joe Masters said that, because, I think it got to the point that there is a modernity that maybe our industry is missing, and having some cultural fluency around these different touch points can really work. It just speeds up the delivery of the message. And David, I really loved how you brought up the contrast marketing in that light as well. Like, I think, again, everybody knows what the villain is here. You didn't have to explain the villain, but you owned the joke in a way that allowed you to become the hero.
Well, owning the joke, I think, as I sort of thumb through and comb through the reactions and maybe some of the voices that are maybe a little more skeptical about the spot, it comes down to what a lot of famous comedians have said over the years, and that, like, one of the greatest truth-telling tools is humor. And if something's not true, it's not funny. And if something's funny, it's generally true. And so people can say, that these are sort of dated tropes, or these are archetypes that are no longer relevant and all those things, but there's something true about it because most people find it funny. And so that's sort of a way that we can back into things without overcomplicating it. It's like, no one's going to go see a stand-up comic who's not funny because what they're saying is not true, and it's not grounded in, like, real problems. And so that was something that was kind of interesting as well. Earlier, you noted some, like, more contemporary or modern pop cultural references, and I wanted to be clear about the dated ones I was referencing, and that they're sort of timeless, these Jungian archetypes of the hero's journey. When you said that earlier, some people are saying higher ed has lost its way or its swagger a little bit, and oftentimes there aren't narrative structures to a lot of the marketing you see in higher ed. It's sort of, an amalgamation of B-roll with voiceover, it's rehashing the same old sort of tropes and scenes that we're all very familiar with. And so we wanted to return to that really base archetypal storytelling using a structure that is tried and true in pop culture, because it speaks deeply to what everyone can relate to. At some level, I think also what makes the spot work is that everybody has an inner Featherstone, depending on what day they wake up and who they choose to be. And one of the interesting things is that I think, because we've talked a lot about it, that perhaps people's reaction to Featherstone maybe says more about who they are than the spot itself. And, in some cases, that's a really uncomfortable thing. And I think we didn't make it so everyone would like it. we made it so that we could talk and have conversations like this. And we're just so pleased that people are interested in what we're doing, even if they don't like it. It's wonderful.
Well, I think that theater is how culture processes uncomfortable truths. And whether that's through the comedian on the stage or the ancient Greeks, it's that performance has always allowed us to critique without direct confrontation. And that is what I think is part of the brilliance of the Featherstone campaign. Like, you're using fiction to tell this very real story.
Well, and it seems like you're getting, mixed reactions, which is good, right? I think something worth talking about, people don't agree on. And so there's the Chronicle article. Mallory mentioned I published an op-ed. There's a lot of LinkedIn and maybe other social media chatters, Slack chatter. I'd love to hear what you're hearing from the circle kind of closest to you, or maybe it's people far away who are reaching out and saying, bravo. Maybe it's, what kind of feedback are you getting besides some of what's already been mentioned, or maybe highly visible to those of us in higher ed marketing?
Yeah, obviously, I think not everyone may realize that President Marshall is actually the voiceover in the spot. And that was on his request because he said, this is a message that we've been leading with, and this has never been tried before. And I want to make sure that no matter what the outcome is, that I'm the one delivering that key message. And so he's been getting a lot of response. And I asked him just today, just give me a flavor of what it is. And he said it's 99.9% positive. And that wasn't necessarily expected by any of us, because even internally, it wasn't. And we didn't design it to be. If you've ever been at a conference table and you're showing your work and everyone politely claps and says, "Oh, isn't that nice?" You're on the wrong track, because you probably, if everyone agrees that the spot is nice, it's probably not going to say much. That wasn't the case for us. We had a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. And, a little anecdote, one of my trusted colleagues, who's another vice president here, had some concerns with the concept when it was still very, very, very rough. And I went in and had a heart-to-heart, and I asked him, this is exactly, CMU has been saying this for years. And he said, the emphasis is on the wrong thing. It's on the joke. It's not the heroine. And that completely changed how we approached developing the storyboards in the spot. And if it wasn't for that tough criticism, it would have turned out to be something different. It may not have worked. And so, internally, it was the discord and disharmony around some of the details that made, I think, a much better product. And that's a huge divergence, I think, from a lot of what higher ed does, which is sort of try to create content towards consensus.
So there was some commentary, though, that the value proposition came a little late, that Colorado Mesa's offering wasn't clear and strong enough. Can you talk about that and the balance of the joke and the message at the end?
Yeah, I can see how some might walk away with that deficiency top of mind. That was intentional, because the campaign is more than the 90-second storytelling. We have all the traditional assets you'd have in a campaign, and all of those are meant to spark interest in what we have to say, which I think it's doing that. And then when students land here at CMU, whether they come to a Mesa experience, an orientation, a campus visit, whether they click on our landing page, that's when we fill in the gaps with the proof points. So the spot is not meant to be a self-contained, all-encompassing commentary about everything we have to offer. It was meant to say, to contrast who we are at our core, and hopefully attract some attention so people might want to learn more. We're out in the middle of Western Colorado, and one of the most beautiful places on earth. And when people come to visit us, they tend to enroll. And so the spot wasn't meant to be an end-all, be-all, comprehensive storytelling about everything that we have to offer. It was meant to spark interest in who we are at the value level, at the mission, vision level. And I think we've done that.
Disclaimer, my son visited and he really loves it.
Oh, really?
We don't know yet where he's going, but he did apply.
Can you remind him that we care about who he is, not just who he knows?
I will make sure he knows that. It came through to me on the campus visit, I will say that. But also just this really emphasis that the campaign is more than the video. And I think sometimes if we take one asset and take it out of context and forget, I think that's maybe the brilliant part of the video, is that you didn't try to have it cover every part of the marketing needs. And it was a piece in the campaign. It had a clear function, a clear audience, a clear purpose. And you let the website and the social and all of the other things I'm sure you're going to be doing round out the brand and the message.
Yeah, I think what you just said is more clear than what I said, but I thank you for that clarity. That's exactly what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah, the characters I think are interesting and powerful, and there's opportunity for script flip and all those things, and we've been talking about that quite a bit. And I think, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves either. I don't think this has ever been done before. As far as we can tell, it's on a number of fronts, and you want to be, I think, circumspect and measured, and really understand how it's landing. But yeah, I think one of the initial designs around the concept is that the fictitious world that exists at the highest level of abstraction, Featherstone, has all kinds of potential to develop additional storylines. And I don't know, it'd be kind of cool if we were able to do that. But if we didn't, I think the spot itself invoked a really important cultural conversation that we're right in the middle of, and that's just an amazing opportunity for us.
Well, David, I want to wrap it up with one final question. And Mallory, maybe you have some thoughts on this too. What would you say to the other VPs and CMOs who want to take creative risks but are feeling stuck in safe territory?
Maybe two things. I think the first thing is that for us, it never really felt like a risk at all, because we have that straight line that exists back to the values where we started. And so it kind of goes back to, well, if you're speaking the truth as you understand it and as you've defined it, then you're kind of in safe ground. The risk was relative, and when we walked it out, it wasn't that bad for us, at least. And so I think there's that. But the other part too is that I think sometimes in large organizations and maybe in certain institutions, you might have to leave, because I don't know that there's that many places that could do a spot like this, because we have leadership at the CEO level, at the president's level, that are fully committed to what we're trying to do. And that opens up the aperture for creativity in a way that I don't think exists in places where you're managing to risk, and maybe you have opaque lines back to your mission, vision, and values that aren't as clear as ours are. And, so I think sometimes it may not be possible in all places. And if you're getting a creative itch, or you want to say something that you're not able to say, it might be that you just got to try something different.
Can I ask about early data and outcomes? Because I was going to reply to your question, Maria, but then I was like, look, I could sit here and give you my opinion, and we could debate the art, we could debate the risk, but you can't debate the numbers. They are what they will be. So are you seeing early indicators? And actually, what are your KPIs for this campaign? Maybe that's actually the place to start. And then are you seeing early indicators that you are reaching success?
Yeah, what I'm probably about to say is going to, all of my colleagues that are watching will probably think I'm insane, but we were okay with a little bit of the unknown here, because there's so many, how do you establish a baseline, and how do you measure success relative to what we're doing? It's so different, and it's an untested sort of approach. And so what I can say is that, the content itself has outperformed anything that we've ever done. And it did so before we even spent a dime. And I think that whether it converts, and yields is something that it wasn't designed for that. But if it did, that would be great. I think what we were trying to do is spark a conversation and try to find a way to clearly differentiate that what we're doing is different beyond lip service, beyond PR stunts and talking points. And that, if the campaign performs like a traditional campaign, and we can measure it with the traditional KPIs that you would use in a higher education marketing campaign, that'll be great. And we'll be looking at that stuff, and we'll be adjusting in real time. And we've spent a year putting this together, so we have some plans for that, but that wasn't why we made it. And so we're open, and so is our leadership, to the unknowns about how it will perform from a traditional standpoint. But there was one comment that was somewhere in one of the LinkedIn threads, I believe it said, I don't think the risk is going to pay off. And it made me smile, because it's just maybe not understood that we're measuring risk in a whole different way here, and we're measuring something entirely different. I think the fact that I'm honored that you invited me on the podcast. And that's just one of the things, that's been happening lately around here that has never happened before. And, if that's how we're measuring success at this time, if you would have told me that, we'd be in a feature story in the Chronicle, or that we'd be getting outreach from major national news outlets, I want to say, maybe as we also wrap up too, that Kyle Clark with 9 News in Denver, I think if you were to list the most influential and respected journalist in the state, nobody would have a list without him being at the top, if not near the top. And I think the interest that he took and the interview that he did with President Marshall was a game changer for the campaign, because I think somebody of his credibility in that world, taking an interest in what we're doing, validated it in a way that is really special. And so I think, we've been focusing on those measures in terms of the success, and we'll come back to the KPIs when we've been in market for a little bit.
I'll say too, someone in the LinkedIn comments had said, I never heard of Colorado Mesa until this week. And I think, you're on news across the state, across the nation, and that is a huge win. And you're doing it in a way that is really true to the brand.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And yeah, well, we say in our brand kit that we're Maverick at heart. And I hope that, some people walk away with the impression that when we say that, we actually mean it. And yeah, just honored to be on your show, and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Well, David, I'm a fan of the taking the risk and knowing your brand and evaluating risk differently based on what your goals are. So I hope everyone listening had a lot to take away from this.
The creative risk is so rare in this sector. It told a truth. You didn't flinch away from it. You used incredible storytelling. I mean, there's so much to be proud of here. And you have, where we just landed, you have absolutely helped to elevate CMU from, regional awareness to national relevance. So congratulations. And, I am looking forward to seeing where this campaign goes over time. And we'll have to have you back on, David, 6 or 12 months from now to kind of do a little more retro, because I'm sure people will just continue to pay attention. Listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget, head to Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate and review. That is what helps this podcast continue to grow. And if you are listening on the day or the week that this drops, oh my gosh, we are less than a week away from AMA. I know Maria and I will be there, as well as many of your favorite Enrollify creators. We are, just going to be doing a great party on Monday night. We've got so many great things happening while at AMA. Please come find us, come up, say hello. We're so excited to put some faces to names, because you never know who's listening, and is always the highlight of these events when we get to meet you in real life. So please, please, please come find us. David, thank you again. Any parting thoughts, and where can listeners find you?
coloradomesa.edu. And we like to say, go Mavs.
Go Mavs. All right.
Thank you.
All right, folks. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.